Hi, I'm Dan.
I'm Kevin.
We're here with Fanatik Bike Co. to look at the new Knolly Warden Carbon. Tell us a little bit about Knolly.
Yeah, Knolly's probably a brand that some of you are familiar with, but maybe not too sure about where they come from and kind of what their story is. So we were actually lucky enough to meet with Noel, the owner and operator and designer and everything else related to Knolly. He took the time to explain kind of the come-ups of Knolly and how they started off basically out of his garage. He was an engineer and he wanted to design bikes that were suited to the riding that he liked to do in North Van, all the technical gnarly trails that you can get into up there. He wanted to build a bike that suited that stuff just perfectly. So little by little, I believe started with 10 bikes. He made them out of his garage, all his friends loved them, bought them right up, and from there Knolly took off, became a bike brand that happened to be an engineering company also.
Yeah, so they introduced the first Warden around 3 years ago, and that was an alloy bike. All the bikes up until this bike here were alloy, and they take great pride in all their alloy bikes. They see them as on the same level as today's higher-end carbon bikes, just maybe a slightly different feel. But that was a bike that sort of went back to their roots of being something that you could take up to Whistler for the day and get a bunch of park laps in. You could take out and shuttle if you wanted to. You could pedal, go out in all-day epics if you wanted to do that. But the industry has been pushing carbon, we think with good reason. So they just last year introduced the Knolly Warden Carbon. This is a pretty neat bike. It stays true to their sort of high quality, really well thought out engineering background. There's all sorts of features on here. Things like extremely well designed cable routing ports so you can internally route your cables and they won't rattle.
Yeah, this bike is so quiet. I noticed that.
That's, yeah, on the handful of rides I've been able to get out over the past few weeks, it's astonished me with how quiet it is. You can access all the internal cables through a Di2 port that they put underneath, sort of right in front of the bottom bracket area, so you can easily route your cables internally.
I know the mechanics love that too.
They do, all you home mechanics out there. You can run Di2. There's a place to put your battery if you want to do so. Other features like insane tire clearance. You can fit up to a 2.6 in the rear of this bike.
Nice.
So this is a 155 mil travel bike, 6-inch travel bike. So a lot of people may want to run big knobby tires. You can also put a really big chain ring on here. There's no issues there. You can run a dual chain ring up front if you wanted to do that.
Yeah, I think it's worth mentioning, you stated that for a while they only made the Warden in an alloy.
Yeah.
I think it's cool that the reason they stayed true to that was because they believe that their alloy process of putting the bike together was on par with what most companies are putting out as their carbon options. The ride quality is so dialed in. They just really took the time to make sure everything was just right, and when they made their first carbon bike, all that same philosophy, all that attention to detail and the striving for perfection carried over to what's possibly the most beautiful carbon bike that I've seen.
Yeah, when Noel and the rest of his crew came down to introduce these bikes recently, he really delved into the extent to which, or all the time they took with their frame manufacturer in Taiwan, who they consider to be the best, one of the best, if not the best carbon frame manufacturer out there, to really get every small little detail worked out. Like, like all these portings, they specified that they wanted threaded bottom brackets. The factory didn't want to do that because that's more difficult for them, but they said, hey, no, we need this.
So they're not taking the cheap option out. They're not looking to just mass produce. Their goal isn't to put the most bikes on the shelf. They want to make the best bikes for the riders who want that kind of quality. Mm-hmm. And riding it, that definitely translates. Now I wanted to point out the suspension here. It's kind of a unique design. It's actually based off of a horse link suspension design.
Yeah, it looks...
I noticed there's this extra linkage going on in here. I mean, the pivot point's the same on the chainstay as the horse link, but then there's a little bit extra going on here. What's that all about?
Yeah, so that's that's Knoll's own design. They call it the 4x4 suspension design, and it does exactly what you say. It has an extra link in the system, and what that actually does is it allows them to uncouple the suspension kinematics from each other and tune them each individually, a little more so than you could with a traditional horse link or other, single pivot, other designs that are out there. And what it does is it makes for a really nice, smooth, progressive curve.
Leverage curve.
Leverage curve, thank you. That stays really consistent the whole way through. It's extremely predictable. It's extremely active. So one thing that you'll notice on this bike when you're pedaling both up and shredding down is incredible amounts of traction. Yeah, and it's, as far as I can tell, it's awesome.
Yeah, so you're saying all these things, you're saying it's active, it's playful, it's supple, and they're able to achieve all those things by adding in this unique extra linkage, and that's kind of the heart and soul of the 4x4 design. They really don't have to make very many sacrifices because they're able to independently tune separate characteristics that they're striving for. Everybody makes sacrifices when they're designing their bikes and what they think is worth giving up. Knolly doesn't give up much, If you're pedaling up fire roads, you might want to flip the climb switch. That's about it.
When I first hopped on this bike and started climbing up, I noticed it had a nice upright seating position, which they'll attribute to their really forward seat tube, which also I should note is a straight seat tube, so you can run as long of a post as you want. You can fit a 175 mil dropper
for all your
post
Clydesdales
easily on there, which is an awesome feature as far as I'm concerned, especially for smaller riders, where a lot of times other frame designs won't allow them to run a longer drop, even if they could potentially use one. Yeah, really upright, fun pedaling position, and then the trail turned down, and I noticed how nimble and quick the bike felt. And so at this point, this first ride, I had yet to look at the geo and the numbers. So in my head, I'm thinking, this has got to be a really short bike. Knoll's an old school North Shore rider. He's probably, harkening back to the days of short, hucks to flat. And I had it in my mind that I wasn't going to be able to shred at high speeds and, be stable, which turned out not to be the case. And I got home and started comparing the numbers, started looking at the numbers. I'm 5'10" and typically like to ride a medium. And I compared it to the numbers on the Insurgent, which I've owned. I compared it to a Santa Cruz Nomad, which is well known as a enduro thrasher. And this bike is just as long, almost identical numbers to the Insurgent.
Right on
it's
par.
Longer than the Nomad, longer front end, same wheelbase as all these bikes. It's it's right up there with the most progressive bikes out there. Yet it keeps this incredibly fun feel.
Yeah.
It's awesome. So Kevin, you had mentioned how quiet this bike is. It's got all these awesome features like a water bottle cage, huge tire clearance, internal, external cable routing, whichever you prefer. Is there anything else that we missed?
I think it was pretty neat that they included the option to be able to flip the geometry. There's a little flip chip down at the bottom of the shock link mount there, and it's got two positions, a neutral position and a slack position. That does a little bit to the geometry.
Yep, it takes it from a 66-degree head tube angle bike with, I believe, a 17-inch reach for the medium to a 65.5 head tube angle bike. It extends the reach by an inch. It extends the effective top tube by an inch. The wheelbase, across the board just gets a little lower, a little slacker, a little more aggressive, all at the switch of one bolt, which is pretty neat. Yeah, we've got it in our custom bike builder now. You can get the frame if you want. We're doing custom builds. You can check out other builds that people have done on it in our build gallery. Yeah, you know where to find us, fanatikbike.com. Check us out and let us know if you have any other questions about it.
Thanks.